Hello everyone, welcome back to this video series on clinical SAS SDTM programming. In this video, we will see an example of a domain named functional test in which we are trying to summarize the data collected under the instrument called 6-minute walking test. So let us now go to the concept description of FT first, and then we'll move to the lesson description, CRF explanation, and then specification and SAS programming for it. So in some clinical trials, we may have to collect data about some task-based evaluations like assessment of mobility of the subject or assessment of dexterity or cognitive ability of the subjects. So these are task-based evaluations. So they would be asked to perform a task, and then there will be some evaluation based on how they perform or the task. There are several standalone validated instruments like forms or questionnaires, so which fall under this class of task-based evaluations. Some examples include 10-meter walk or run. So the subject may be asked to take a 10-meter walk or run and then make some assessments. And then 4-stair ascent, 4-stair descent, and then 6-minute walking test, PUL, which is performance of the upper limb module, SPPB, which is short physical for performance battery. So MMSC, which is mini mental state examination. So these are some examples of the categories where some functional tests are to be conducted, which are task-based evaluations. So SDTM standard has a standard domain for capturing these findings, so which is functional tests, and it is abbreviated as FT. So FT dataset belongs to findings class and has an expected record structure of one record per functional test finding per time point per visit per subject. So what type of information is typically collected for functional tests? So it is the date of assessment. Is the test performed or not? So if it is not performed, the reason why it is not performed, short name of the test. So we will use an abbreviation for each of the question or the assessment that is being performed, and that will be kept in short name of the test. And then the description or the name of the test, and then the position of the subject when the test was performed if it is applicable, and then the result of the assessment of the test. And the result will be presented in original units and in standard units wherever applicable after converting the original units to standard units. And then some derived information like baseline flag when the results of the tests are collected pre and post treatment period. Let us now to the lesson description. So here if you see in this lesson, so we will see complete key programming for SDTM FT domain, and this lesson is about a functional test named 6-minute walk test. So this test examines the cumulative distance walked every minute walked up to 6 minutes. So the patient would be asked to walk for 6 minutes, and at the end of each minute the cumulative distance walked by the subject would be recorded. So and we will what programming aspects were covered in this lesson are creation of rows for test CDs from variables using arrays. So in some of the previous examples for similar scenarios, we might have used explicit output statements, but here we will be making use of arrays to do that. And then here we will be creating a variable called LOBXFL, which is last observation seen prior to exposure. So which is a specific variable introduced in SDTM IG 3.3, and creation of study day and other SDTM general variables. So now let us move on to the CRF. So this is the form that would be used to make assessments when the subject is performing the task. The task is to walk for 6 minutes. So, and the date when the assessment is performed or the date when the information is collected, it is coming in a variable named FT02 underscore raw in our input dataset, and we are collecting that information, the date when the assessment is performed. And then when the subject is asked to walk, so they may need some assisting devices for walking. So if that is the case, so that device used is captured in this question called assisted device, and it will be seen in a variable named smwt underscore device. And then we are we have a question of asking what is the total distance covered at 1 minute. So that response is coming in a question in a variable named smwt underscore 1 for us in the raw data. And then distance at 2 minutes, distance at 3 minutes, distance at 4 minutes, and 5 minutes and 6 minutes. So it is the cumulative distance walked till each minute specified here. So let us now try to see which variables these particular information get mapped to into the SDTM FT domain. So date collected has to be mapped to FT DTC variable. And then we have this assisted device. So this is not a standard question as per FT collection for 6 minute walking test. So this has to be put in sub FT. So FTA ASST DV, which is functional test assisting device. So we are presenting this information in sub FT domain. And then we have this question of distance at first 1 minute. So we are being asked to present the value in FTORRES on the record where FT test CD is equal to 6MW101. So FTORRES when FT test CD is equal to 6MW101. So we will create a row to capture the information present on this field, and on that row we will use the value of 6MW101 in FT variable, and the actual value would be stored in FTORRES. And then we have the next question, which is distance at 2 minutes. So here the same concept is applicable like for 1001 or distance at 1 minute. So we will capture the result for this question on the variable FTORRES on the row where FT is equal to 6MW102. So we will create a separate row for this variable and store the result in FTORRES. Similarly, we have additional tests of 103, 104, 105 and 106 for to capture the distance walk till 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. So this is the case report form that is used to collect information about 6 minute walking distance, and we have seen what are the names of the raw dataset variables, and we have also seen where exactly the particular information collected would get mapped to under SDTM domain in terms of SDTM annotations. Now we will move on to the specification. So here we have specification given in terms of variable name, label, general comment, and form specific derivation. So here we also have a column called sub column. So if it is indicated as Y, the variable specified that would become a QNAM in the supplementary domain. So we have study ID, so for which we are being asked to populate as myCSG. And then for domain, so we are being asked to populate as FT, so which is the abbreviation for functional tests. And then for uSubJD, we are being asked to concatenate the value present in study ID and subject variable with a hyphen in between. Study ID and subject variable values have to be used with a hyphen concatenated in between. And then for FT-seek, we are being asked to sort the records based on uSubJD, FT-cat, FT-testcd, FTDTC, and then set to 1 on the first record of each subject and increment by 1 for each subsequent record within the subject. Say for example, if we have 3 records for that subject, on the first record we are specifically asked to sort the records first based on the values in these variables. After sorting this, so on the first record within each subject, so we are being asked to set the value to 1. On the subsequent records of that subject, we are asked to increment it by 1. So here if we see for 1002, there is 1 record, so that is reset to 1. And again 1003 on the first record we have set it to 1. On the subsequent record we have incremented it by 1. So this is what is being asked for creation of FT-seek. So important thing is that we have to pre-sort the records based on the variable specified. And then FT-testcd. So we will now first see. So create a record with FT-testcd is equal to 6MW101 to store the result from SMWT underscore 1. So we have seen that our CRF has all of these questions. So we'll get one row for each of these assessments. So we'll quickly take a look at the input data SMWT so that we get an understanding. So we have one variable for each of the questions on the CRF page. So, but as per the SDTM structure, each of these individual questions have to become rows. So we are being asked to make the transformation. So how is that being done? Here is specified in the specification. So in order to store the value present in the variable smwt underscore one on a record, so we are asked to create a record with ft test cd is equal to 6mw101. So if we take the example here, so if we have four questions as variables here, so and we are being asked to transform it into vertical structure. So item 1, item 2, item 3 and item 4. So and the responses on each of those items have to be presented in the result variable. So resp1 is the response for item 1, resp2 is the response for item 2, and similarly the responses for each of those questions would be put in result variable, and we are indicating which item or which question is that in test cd variable. So we are being asked to create a record for to store the information for smwt1. On that record we are being asked to use s6mw101, and similarly for underscore 2 variable, so we are being asked to use the value of 6mw102, and so we will be converting the data which is in wide format to long format. So we'll be creating records for all of these 6 individual questions collected for us. So here the screenshot is representing a generic notation where only we have 4. So but here in the CRF for 6-minute walking test, we had 6 such questions. So it will become 6 rows with 6 test CD values. So we are being asked to do that here. And then we have FT test variable, so which says, so for when FT test CD is equal to 6M1001. So we are being asked to use the value of 6MW1 and distance at 1 minute. And when FT test CD is equal to 6MW102, so we are being asked to use the value of 6MW1 hyphen distance at 2 minutes in FT test variable. Similarly, we have been given the FT test values for all the other test CD values as well. And then for FTCAT, we are being asked to manually assign the value of 6-minute walk. And then FTORRES, so we are being asked to populate using smwt underscore 1 when creating the row for 6mw101. So here the result is nothing but our ORRES variable. So when we are creating the row for the 6mw101, so we are being asked to use the corresponding variable for that test. And similarly, when creating the row for item 2, we should use the value in item 2 under result variable. So that is what is being told here in the specification. So we are being given the input variables for result variable for each of the test CDs. So from 1 to 6. And then for FTORRESU, so it is the distance walked in meters. So we are being asked to populate as M. And then for FTSTRESC, so we are asked to populate with the values coming from ft.ftORRES. So as the original unit is equivalent to the standard unit, so we are just copying the values from ORRES to STRESC. And then for FTSTRESN, so we are being asked to convert the values in FTSTRESC to numeric format. And then FTSTRESU, so which is again populate as M. FTLOBXFL, which is last observation before exposure flag. So populate as Y on the latest record with non-missing result on or prior to DM RFXST for each subject and test. So here it is as per the protocol design. So on the day 1 also this assessment is performed before giving the study medication. So only when date is collected, if the test is performed prior to giving the medication, so though the definition says last observation before exposure flag, so we can still go ahead with on or prior, because we know from the protocol that the test would be administered on that day of treatment, but just before giving the treatment. So we should not get confused on this definition of on or prior with the last observation before exposure flag. But if we clearly know when only dates are collected for treatment start and the test. So if we know from the protocol that the test is performed before giving administration on that day one, so we can still go ahead and use on or prior in this LOB XFL definition. So and then we have FT eval. So evaluator here is investigator. So we are being asked to populate it as investigator. And then visit num, we are being asked to populate it with the value from folder seek. And for visit, so we are being asked to populate it with the value from folder name. And then we have FTDTC. So for which we are being asked to use the value from FTDAT underscore raw to create FTDTC. And then we have FTDY. So we are being asked to check FTDTC is on or so let's go through the definition given here. Populate using FTDTC and dm.rfstdtc. If FTDTC is on or after rfstdtc, then populate with the resulting value from FTDTC of FTDTC minus rfstdtc plus 1. Else if FTDTC is before rfstdtc, then populate with the resulting value of FTDTC minus rfstdtc. On or after, we will add 1 to the difference. If it is before, we do not add that plus 1 to it. And then we have AQNAM, so which is FTASSTDV, so which is assisted device. So we are being asked to populate it with the value present in SMWT underscore device variable. So here we will not explicitly create supplementary domain, so we'll just keep it as an additional variable in the parent dataset itself. Let us now move to the programming aspect of it. So here we have on the left hand side I have my program that creates my FT dataset. On the right hand side I have my input dataset, intermediate datasets, and the final dataset that is getting created. So here I am using my SMWT dataset, which is the primary dataset for our FT dataset, and then we need DM dataset for RFXSTDTC to derive our LOB XFL. So here we have SMWT dataset, we have study ID, subject, folder seek, folder name, record position, FTDAT underscore raw, and the device used for walking, and the distance at 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3, 4, 5, and 6 minutes. So we have these variables in the raw data. And then we'll be transforming these into our rows as per the specification. So we create required variables in FT. So we are using FT01 as input. FT01 is nothing but a copy of this SMWT dataset itself. So we will be using FT01 dataset to create FT02. So we are creating some common variables which are applicable across different rows for each of these questions. So study ID, we were asked to use the value of my CSG, so we are using that. And then we have domain variable, so for which we were asked to use the domain abbreviation for function test, which is FT for domain, so we are assigning that here. And for USubjID, we were asked to concatenate the value present in study ID and subject, so we are concatenating those two using catx function, so with hyphen as the delimiter in between. And then for FTDTC, so we were asked to use the value from FTDAT underscore raw and convert it into ISO 8601 notation. So we have the date available here in date 11 format. So we are first converting those character date values into numeric date values using input function and date 11 in format, as the raw date values are in date 11 format. So first convert them into numeric and then convert them back into ISO 8601 notation using put function with YYMMDD 10 dot format. So ISO 8601 notation, the date component is in the same format of SAS YYMMDD 10 dot in format. So we are using the YYMMDD 10 dot format. And for FTCat, we were asked to use the value of 6-minute walk. So we are assigning the text 6-minute walk to FTCat. And then for FTEval, we were asked to populate it with the value of investigator. So we are doing that here. And then for visit num and visit, so we were asked to use the values from folder seek and folder name respectively. So we are making those assignments here on these two lines of code. And then here comes our core logic of creating additional rows for each of these variables. So here we are making use of array approach to create rows. So here I am creating an array named qvars to define uh, the temporary name of qvars for this set of 6 variables. So smwt1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm creating another array which is named as testcd with 6 elements in it, and I'm calling it as temporary array, which means so it will not create the variables in the final data set that is outputted. So it will be available for us to use in the processing, but will not be returned to the output data set when we say it as temporary. So how does this get processed? So I'm looping. I'm using a do loop here. So I'm looping it how many times? From with the counter variable of I is equal to 1 to dim of qvars. So dim function is an array function. So what it does is it returns the number of elements in an array. So here we have used the name of the array. So qvars, we have defined it with 6 variables. So the dimension of this qvars array is 6. So it would return me the value of 6. So do I is equal to 1 to 6 is written. So we could have specified 6 directly, but this is kind of like a dynamic approach. So if you want to make use of this code somewhere else, so where you may have more number of questions. So if you use demo functions, you need not change this. So because it automatically counts the total number of variables you have specified here on the array definition. And then how is this getting processed? So we are creating ft testcd variable by fetching the value of testcd of I. So when the loop is running for the first time, the counter value would be 1. So testcd of 1. So in the testcd array, so we have defined here 6 elements with the values of the testcds that have to be used for each of the questions here. For smwt1, so it was 101. For 2, it was 102, and 3, and so on. So we have the testcds available here. So we are making use of that logic. When it is running for the first time, so it will resolve to testcd of 1, which means so it will go and fetch the first value from this array. So which is 6mw101. So the first instance, the value would get assigned as 6mw101. And for FTORRES, so we are fetching the first value from qvars array. So qvars of 1 is nothing but the variable smwt1. So the value present in smwt1 would be assigned to the variable FTORRES. And then for STRESC, so it is same from the value of smwt1. So we are using the qvars of I. So q, which is nothing but qvars of 1 when it is running for the first time. And for STRESN, so we were asked to convert the value from STRESC to numeric format. So we are making use of input function to create that, and we are making use of best.in format to convert it into numeric format. And then we have FTORRESU, we were asked to assign the value of meters, so we are assigning that here. And for STRESU, so it is a copy of FTORRESU, so we are doing that. And then after making all these assignments with the value of 1 in the counter, so we are outputting the record. Then whatever is available in the PDV at that point in time, so would be written out. And then so it goes back and loops with a counter value of 2. So what happens when this becomes 2 is, so for ft testcd, so the value would be fetched from the second instance of the array specified of testcd. So what is the second value in testcd2 is 6mw102. And similarly for FTORRES, it becomes qvars of 2. So what is the second variable specified on the qvars array? It is 6smwt underscore 2. So it would fetch the value from smw22 and assign to FTORRES. And this loop continues for all the other values of till 6. So when it is getting processed for the third, so it would pull the value from the third value in testcd and third variable from the third variable specified from the qvars array. So and then we would continue and output it 6 times. So one record is being outputted 6 times using the loop here. So and each of those instances we are dynamically assigning the values based on different variables using arrays here. So let us take a look at our FT02 dataset. So here if we have 16 records and if every record is getting output at 6 times, so we should have 16 multiplied by 6 records. So which would technically be 96 is I believe. So let us see. So we have 96 records created. So on each of these records, if we see, so this is one parent record. So till here, till the first record. So we see this examination is on 7th Jan for subject 1001. So we would have 6 rows, one row for each different test CD 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, and 106. On each of these rows, so what would be present? So let me open our FT01 here on the left hand side. So here if we see, so 54 is the value in SMWT1. So we have created a row with the FT test CD of 101 and the associated result has to be stored in FTORR. So it is coming here. And then for SMWT 2_2 on this row, so we should have a row created with 102 in FT test CD and the associated result stored in FTORR. So we have it created. And then for SMWT_3, it is 283. So we have that row created and the result stored in FTORR. Similarly, we have 373, 527 and 510. 373, 527 and 510 available here. So this is how we have created the rows till here. So there seems to be a data issue here. So here if we see the cumulative distance walked till 5th minute itself is coming as 527. So but we have the 6th minute distance as 510. So it cannot be less than 527. So it could be a data issue. So if you are actually encountering any of these kind of scenarios, you would query to the data management team on why that is so. Okay, now let us come back to the program and then see what we are doing further. So we have created row for each of the questions and we have rows for test CDs available in FT02. And then we are creating our LOB XFL. So for LOB XFL, so we need RFXSTDT to be present alongside the FTDTC in our FT dataset. So we are pulling our RFXSTDTC into FT data by merging DM01 at study ID and usubs ID level. And then we are calling that dataset as FT03. So let us take a look at FT03 and towards the right, we should now have the variables corresponding to which we are pulling from demo. So which is RFSTDTC and RFXCNDTC. So we have those variables added. Now we will be able to cross check our FTDTC with RFXSTDTC to see which records are prior to RFXSTDTC. So now, as per the definition, so we were asked to use the records so which are on or prior to RFXSTDTC. So FTDTC less than or is equal to RFXSTDTC is being used, and but we were also asked to use non-missing result records. So we are filtering those records. So in base 01, we'll only have those records which occurred on or prior to the reference exposure start date, which is RFXSTDTC, and with non-missing result. So from this data set, so we are sorting this data set based on subject ID, FT test CD, and FTDTC. So if we have more than one record, so within each test CD, so we are making sure that the latest record is coming at the end. So, and then from that dataset, we are filtering the last record within each FT test CD of a subject. So we'll have one record per subject per test CD, and in this dataset, we have identified the date time of each test CD that is becoming a baseline for a specific subject. So now we will have to use this information to populate our baseline flag in the parent dataset. So let us take a quick look at our base 01 dataset and then see how many records do we have here. So we have 24 records available. So these are the records which are collected on or prior to RFXSTDTC and having a non-missing result. So let us now try to see base 0T. So here we ended up having 12 records, which means so there are multiple collections. Say for example, if for this subject, so if we see, so there is a collection during screening on day one. So let us try to take a look at FTDTC. Where is FTDTC? So let us try to filter. That way it will be easy. Let us filter for subject 1001. Let us filter for one test CD. So let us filter for that first test CD. So we have two records here. So RFXSTDTC is on 21st Jan 2023, and let us examine FTDTC. Where do we have it? So we have a collection on 7th Jan and a collection on the day of treatment start date, which is 21st Jan 2023. So two collections on or prior to the treatment start date for this subject and test CD. So from this, what do we need to do? We need to use the latest record for baseline. So what we have done in the next step is, so let us filter for the same subject again, 1001 SMW 101. So the latest of the two, 7th Jan versus 21st Jan is 21st Jan. So we have identified the date which is becoming baseline for that subject for this test CD and subject. So we will now have to use this information, and on this record of subject 1001 for 6MW101 on day 21, so we will have to populate the baseline flag as Y. So how we can do is that we can merge our dataset baseline daytime records containing dataset to our parent dataset, and if there is a matching subject ID, test CD and ATC between these two, so if the record is, if that time point is coming from B dataset, then we are assigning FT as Y, which means so this will be true on those records where the record has become baseline. So on those records, so we are assigning FT as Y. And then in the next step, what we are doing here is creating our FT test value as per the specification for 6MW101. So we were asked to use the value of 6MW1 hyphen distance at 1 minute. And similarly, so we have been given the FT test values to be used for each of the test CDs. So we have done that here. And then we are creating our study day variable here. So in order to create study day, we need to have the numeric dates available for FTDTC and RFSTDTC. So we are creating the numeric dates here and then deriving our study day here using this logic. FTDT minus RFSTDT plus FTDT greater than or is equal to RFSTDT. So if this becomes true, so it will return the value of 1, otherwise it would return the value of 0. So when the FTDT is greater than RFSTDT, as per the specification, we were supposed to add 1 to the difference of these states. Otherwise, we were supposed to add nothing or 0 to the difference. So we are handling that in the programmatic fashion here instead of using if then else statements. And then for finally, so we had a variable information which had to be mapped to a supplementary variable which is FTASSTDV. So we are assigning that here. And then finally, we are creating our sequence variable. So we were asked to sort the values based on subject ID, test CD and FTDTC. And then on the first record of each subject, we were asked to set the value of 1, and on the other instances, we were asked to increment it by 1. So we are creating sequence here. So let us take a look at our FT06 and see if FTseq is created. Yes. And then finally, what we are doing here is we are assigning the list of variables as per the specification to a macro variable named var list, and then keeping only those variables in the subsequent step by specifying the name of the macro variable. And then we have also used a retain statement before the set statement. With this logic, what will happen is in the final dataset, the variables would appear in the same order which we have listed here. So let us take a look at our FT dataset. So we have study ID, domain, usage ID, FTseq, FTTestCD, test, category, original result unit, standard result, character, standard result numeric, and associated unit, LOBXFL, FT evaluator, visit num, visit, FTDTC, DY, and this variable which is supposed to go into the sub FT. So this is how you can create a findings domain which is FT. Thank you for watching and keep learning.